It is now time for Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. And now here he is, the vocal coach for Chris Jericho and MJF, Bill Chase. Thank you, Mr. Podcast Announcer, and welcome to another episode of Diary of a Wrestling Fan, the podcast that chronicles my 33 amazing years of being a fan of professional wrestling. Thank you for listening on Spotify, on Anchor, wherever podcasts are streamed. Hit follow, hit subscribe, hit whatever you got to hit to keep following this podcast wherever you're listening. And if you happen to be listening on YouTube, hit that subscribe button right now. Well, this week is going to be a fantastic episode. I've been asked from the get-go, Bill, when are you going to do a TNA-related episode? Well, here it is. Tess and Albert. Nah, just kidding, obviously. Bad joke, I know. Either way. It's going to be on Kurt Angle arriving in TNA, a huge pivotal moment for that company that I had no idea what impact, pardon the pun, it would have. But before we get to that, I want to give a quick plug once again to Pro Wrestling Ontario. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, give us a like, on Facebook. Also, we are on YouTube. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, scroll up on the right side of the video. There is a link. After you're done listening to the podcast, hit that link, hit subscribe, hit that notifications, watch some matches, watch some complete shows, both Iron Cup tournaments, watch some backstage shenanigans on Foundation, and so much more. That's Pro Wrestling Ontario. So indeed, we're going back 14 years now, 2006. Unbelievable time in wrestling. Kurt Angle did the unthinkable, and he had left the WWE. Now, I remember Angle was on the ECW brand for his final several weeks there. It was a big deal. It was presented as a big deal, and as well it should have been. This came with the announcement when ECW was starting their own brand back in June of 2006, and Angle, of course, was put there to lend it credibility. Now, I personally, as a fan, thought this is great for Angle. This is a great way for him to work with other talents to draw an audience on that brand, and having fight guys like CM Punk. Oh man, how great would that have been? How great would that match have been? It would have been off the charts, I guarantee it. Angle had that ECW mouth guard. It was really good stuff. But I guess there was just so many backstage, I guess you could say, happenings with him and Vince. The story goes Kurt was nursing several injuries, which have been very well documented throughout his career. And he wasn't able to have ample time off from these injuries and just got fed up and requested his release. And according to Angle, he was the top paid talent at that time, which I would have no reason not to believe it. If at the very least he'd be in the top 3 at that point, I'd dare say. But I guess just his injuries, his health issues, which again, very well documented to this day, weren't taking precedent enough, and that's why he requested a release, and it was granted to him in late August of 2006. I remember I was living in my apartment here in Hamilton on Upper Wellington and Mohawk, and I woke up let's face it, I woke up that afternoon because I wasn't working that day. I woke up that afternoon after a night out before with a message on my cell phone from my good friend Paul Cellini. And Paul had left me a message saying, Bill, you got to give me a call back. I'm hearing some fucked up shit about Kurt Angle. I'm like, oh, okay. So I called him back. I'm like, what's up? And he's like, yeah, Angle's gone. I'm like, what do you mean he's gone? You see, Angle had been so woven to the WWE fabric for nearly 7 years at this point that I'm thinking, what do you mean he's gone? It's always a shock when a top guy is released. It's not a shock when a top guy who's fallen down the card is released all that much. But Kurt Angle, even though he was on the ECW brand, again, for all intents and purposes, it was the third brand, but still, he was still seen as a top guy, I think, among many fans. Like, I can't speak for everyone, but I'd almost be willing to bet that a lot of people still felt that way. I certainly felt that way about Kurt. I still saw him as one of the top guys in all of professional wrestling, let alone WWE. So I'm reading all this online on my laptop as I turn it on, and I'm like, oh my God, he's actually gone. So then I'm talking to Paul about it for a while, and we're wondering, well, where's he going to go? I said to him, I said, TNA, it would be a good place for him because their emphasis on talents was significantly different from WWE. I'm not saying that's not a criticism either on the WWE. Just TNA was the alternative to the WWE product. They were not in direct competition with each other. There was nothing like that going on. It just felt to me that TNA showcased a different type of talent, and for lack of a better term, the independent wrestling talent. Not to say WWE didn't, because a lot of their guys were former indie guys at that point already, but it just seemed that style was more showcased in TNA with the Ultimate X matches, the X division as a whole, and just in general, it was just a different presentation. And you know what? I liked it a lot. So I said, no, TNA would be a good place for him, and him being there would definitely boost interest in that company. And he's like, oh, I don't know, it seems a little below him. I'm like, well, compared to WWE, maybe, but I said, again, when a star athlete like Kurt Angle goes to another promotion, eyes are going to go there. And he thought about it. He's like, well, I don't know, maybe I might go to Japan. At that time, Japan wrestling was, it was had its peaks and valleys. It wasn't as heavily regarded as it would become and how we see it today. And it could be kind of going through a peaks and valleys period at this point. I thought, and again, that style, the Japanese style, would definitely work for Kurt, but I don't know. I don't see him going overseas. I even thought that. I'm like, I don't see him leaving the States. I even thought of Ring of Honor. I said, well, Ring of Honor, he could really, really drive up some business there. And again, he could really excel there because, Kurt, as much as he's known as a master technician, and it's well documented, he could work with pretty much anyone of any style. So I felt that anywhere he went, he would thrive. I mean, why wouldn't he? I was sad to see Kurt go because I enjoyed watching him all those years when he was just that doofus. But still, he was that was people. There were a couple of people that kind of harp on his era as a doofus before he shaved his head and became a little more serious. To me, that was just all part of the evolving of his character. He was a doofus, yeah, but he was a doofus who could kick your ass. I mean, he was a doofus that was great in the ring. I mean, he won a gold medal with a broken freaking neck. So, really, Kurt's credibility was still there even when he was playing the doofus. But yeah, when he shaved the head, became a little more ruthless. It was again, his character evolved, and to me, that's what made him all the more intriguing. That he was this nasty, sadistic technician who was going to snap your ankle. So yeah, I was again. I said Kurt can still be a star anywhere. But as we waited, as the weeks gone on, there were rumors. The rumors started appearing on the dirt sheets that he was going to TNA. It was literally a week or so after the Unforgiven pay-per-view for WWE, which was in Toronto, which I'll do a podcast on and talk about it in long form in the future. I went there with my friend Heather and her boyfriend at the time. And I remember when we were on the train ride back to Burlington, and the subject of Kurt Angle came up. Despite everything we had seen on Unforgiven, we were still talking about we talked about all things wrestling. And I said, I heard the rumors about him going to TNA. And Heather looked at me and said, if he goes to TNA, I might have to start watching. And I'm like, yeah, there you go, right there. I mean, she's just one fan, yeah, but still, right there, the intrigue of him being in another company was there. So lo and behold, I believe Dixie Carter announced on an episode of Impact that Kurt had been signed to a new deal, got a great reaction. Then you get the training vignettes of Kurt, and he's about to come in. So I'm excited. I'm like, oh yes, Kurt Angle's going to TNA. Heather and I talked about this, and it was just fantastic that we're going to see him in new matches, see him in fresh rivalries. And I remember watching that episode of Impact Live where they were doing this angle at the time. Again, that's not a pun. Samoa Joe had stolen the NWA Championship from Jeff Jarrett. So Joe was given notice to give the title back or be fired, pretty much. Now, I didn't know what to expect here. I knew Angle had signed with the company, but I didn't think this was going to happen. So as Joe walks to the ring with the title, there's a legal document held by Earl Hebner. Mike Tenay's conducting the interview. He asks Joe, will he hand over the title? Joe describes the legal document, rips out, says, there's your answer. Kurt Angle's music hits, the place goes nuts. Now, I also should emphasize, Samoa Joe, at this point, was red hot. He was one of the hottest stars in TNA. Him, AJ Styles, and Christopher Daniels were just tearing it up constantly. And Joe was undefeated. He was very well protected by the booking in TNA at this point. So when Angle's music hit right away in my head, I'm like, oh God, this is going to be so good. This is a dream match come true. And I was glued to my seat at my apartment at the time, watching this, and I'm like, this is going to be freaking nuts. And Joe laying down the title belt. Him and Angle nose to nose. Angle just headbutts. I'm like, oh my God. I had to take a step back for a second there. His with the Olympic slam. Angle hoists the NWA belt. Joe, that visual of the bloody Samoa Joe standing behind Kurt, ready to murder him. Boom, hits him with a kick. Then Jarrett sneaks in and grabs his title, which kind of killed that Angle, sadly. Okay, I shouldn't say that. Maybe that's just that was how bitter I was at the time. I was enjoying the thing with Joe stealing the NWA title, but at the same time, there was a pay-per-view coming out, so Jarrett kind of needed it, I guess. So yeah. And then they had the pull apart with all the security. They teased it. Some people say they wouldn't even have them touch right away. I say, yeah, well, they did it to a point where it's not like they gave away everything. Keep in mind, Kurt had just hit his finish on Joe. Joe got right back up with a bloody face and everything and went at him. So there you go. To me, that was a good setup. It was a perfect setup for a match, a dream match I truly wanted to see. So right there, I was hooked. Heather messages me. She's like, oh my God, I just heard about that whole thing with Samoa Joe and Kurt Angle. I'm like, yeah, it was great. I was a big Joe fan. He was just a pure badass who just liked to beat the piss out of people. The whole Joe is gonna kill you. Even his t-shirt said that at the time. I knew about Joe from my tape trading days, and I talk about my tape trading days in the archives, right here on Diary of a Wrestling Fan. I talk about it because, you know, Joe has some great runs in Ring of Honor, especially against Punk. So seeing him evolve into this star in TNA, which at the time, to me, was the number 2 company, I'm thinking this guy deserves to be the guy in TNA. Now, we'd often debate it, too, now with Kurt Angle in TNA, how would this affect WWE in any way? Now, there were always people saying TNA was ready to just hit that next level and start competing with WWE. To be honest with you, I never saw it. And that's not a knock on a company because I loved TNA for the longest time. I often said to people, it's not going to beat the WWE. At least not anytime soon. But I remember, who was it that argued with me? It was one of my buddies. Might have been Dave. I don't know. Might have been my buddy Dave. Might have been my buddy Ron. I don't know. But it was one of the two of them. And they were saying how they felt that Angle's arrival is going to start making TNA compete with WWE. They were seriously had a they seriously thought this was going to happen. But I'm thinking, now they're going to need even more than that. I'm reminded them WWE has built such a major conglomerate that since they defeated WCW, there's nobody even in their radar vicinity. Even though TNA was the number 2 company, you could argue ROH might have been number 3 in North America, at least at that time. That WWE still pretty much had a monopoly on national exposure. So logically, they thought, well, maybe they'll start WWE guys got like, oh, I'm like, they don't want to do that. I said, Angle was a different story. Angle was a top guy who asked for his own release. He wasn't rejected by the company. He rejected them. Now, again, a lot of TNA fans, that's Smart Mark fan base. So they knew that Angle left them, not the other way around. Because that is how some Smart Marks think. They think that, oh, he's just going to be cast off, and why do we want him? Why is he here? Now we're just suddenly supposed to believe he's a star? Well, for one, Angle was a star, and for one, he wasn't cast off by them. You can see by the reaction Angle got here. You can see by the number, the ratings started doing well with Angle, now part of the company. Business started doing really well. So really, he still made a difference. And I mentioned that to the guys too. He's still making a difference. So why do we have to make a big deal about them having to beat WWE? Can't they just be who they are? Can't they just be an alternative? I'm more than fine with that. Why don't they just worry about their own selves rather than worrying about competing with WWE? Because ultimately, that's what a lot of experts say. By experts, I mean actual people who lived the war itself, did WCW in. One of the many things. So, another thing I thought of at this point, and I'd mentioned this to the guys, you do know TNA just hired Vince Russo as well, and they actually were happy about this. See, to me, I didn't hate Russo as much as other people did. But I'm like, well, I don't know, he might fit a mold somehow. I mean, he'll probably give more guys pushes that haven't gotten pushes, so that's what he's good at. Like, no, Russo, he's got such expertise that he's gonna compete with WWE. They're trying to say to me, like, you guys not remember what happened in WCW? Oh, but that was standards and practices. I'm like, wow, you guys watched a lot of Russo shoot interviews, didn't you? I mean, geez, there's no excuse for a lot of the stuff he did in WCW, no matter how much he tried to justify it, bro. David Arquette, that story was on cover of newspapers, bro. Didn't put a single ass in the seat, bro. But anyway, I was somewhat skeptical of Russo coming in. I'm thinking, you know what? Okay. So Vince Russo has had success. Why not? Let's see what he can do. And I also heard that he was working with Dutch Mantel, whose reputation I knew about, and of course Jarrett. Like, all right. So, working in that team, they can come with some great stuff. I knew about Dutch's experience in Puerto Rico, especially. I knew that Dutch was a smart wrestling mind. Jarrett, whether you want to admit it or not, knows his shit too. So I'm like, okay. Russo, the difference with Russo then Russo now, Russo is working with guys, again, who have mileage in the world of professional wrestling. Dutch had been around for many years, probably close to 40 years at this point. Jarrett had been around since he grew into the business. So Jarrett's been there his whole life. His dad was one of the all-time famous promoters, Jerry Jarrett. So I'm thinking this could work. And they try. This is the funniest thing about that conversation. Well, I mean, Russo has experience working with Angle. I'm like, no, he doesn't. Yeah, he did. He was in WWF with him. Like, Russo left in October of 99. Kurt wasn't even on TV until November. Oh, but he made those appearances on Heat. I'm like, really? So that's the vast experience Vince Russo has working with Kurt Angle. A couple episodes of Heat, which we don't know for sure if Russo even wrote those. God. These two, there's a reason I don't talk to these two anymore. Yeah, it was both of them doing this because they were pretty, I like to call it know-nothing know-it-alls. Dave and Ron. They were know-nothing know-it-alls. I met these two watching pay-per-views at Filthy McNasty's. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've never been wrong. I've been wrong plenty of times in regards to the world of wrestling. But at the same time, though, I don't deny it. If I don't know anything, then I don't claim to know it. And I try to do my research to this day. When I do these podcasts, I usually try to go from memory, but there are times where I do have to look up something just to make sure that I'm not getting it mixed up with something else. It's okay to look into things, you know? And not just say something out the top of your head and someone calls you out on it. No, that's not it, because you can't admit that you're wrong. Sadly, these two were among the very few wrestling friends I had at the time. There was my friends who I mentioned on previous podcasts, my best friends from high school, John, Jeff, and Tom. We're not watching. I hadn't even heard from Tom in over a year at this point. Jeff, I believe around this time was when he moved to Caledonia. Didn't see much of him for a while. John, same thing. He didn't move, mind you. He just stopped talking to me. But yeah, I had my Burlington crew that I had just met a year prior. Again, I was where my friend Heather came in, and Heather and her friends. And her friends weren't close friends. I liked them all. They were all awesome people. A lot of them were pretty hilarious, too. Heather invited us over to her house for parties and that. So she was my connection to that Burlington crew. And even though if she's listening, I don't get to see enough of you, Heather. I used to see you a lot on Facebook, but that's about it. And we message each other once in a blue moon. But she's an awesome girl. Hasn't aged a day since 2006. So, oh crap! Probably all my male Facebook friends are gonna start looking her up now. Don't. All right. So, I had my Burlington crew. I had, again, my good friend Paul Selini. He was part of that crew, pretty much. He was part of a different Burlington crew. Him and his buddy, guy by the name of Paul Quinn. Yeah, that's another story for another day. Those guys had their table, their people, some of which I got to know. My friend Kyle McCluskey was kind of in and out of things at that point. He would have come and watched the occasional pay-per-view, but he was losing interest in wrestling, especially when one of his favorites, Chris Jericho, at this point, was on his sabbatical from wrestling in general. So the friends I had watching wrestling were minimal at best. Now, leading up to this whole thing with Angle and Samoa Joe, Angle he was a guest enforcer in a match between Jarrett and Sting at Bound for Glory. So, I mean, okay, this keeps Angle on TV, keeps him in the main event picture. Sting won the match, became the champion. And then it was leading to him and Joe at Genesis. So Heather asked if maybe we could watch the pay-per-view at my place. Bars didn't show TNA pay-per-views. They didn't drum up enough business to really justify them being shown in bars. And again, that's not a knock on them. That's just how it was. But even though I'm thinking, you know what, Angle will probably improve their pay-per-view buys, and when I later found out he did. But I'm thinking, yeah, but I wouldn't bank on any bars showing it. I don't want to be calling on every single bar. Hey, you're showing TNA Pay Per View? I'm like, TNA? No, we're not. We don't show that kind of stuff here. Hopefully, somebody get that joke. But I talked to my parents. I wasn't living at home at the time. I talked to them and I said, there's a pay per view coming up. I'll pay for it, obviously. But we can't go to the bar to watch it. We had the basement. We had the TV in the basement with the satellite box, and Mom said that's fine. So I was gonna have my first ever TNA pay-per-view party. I'd had WWE, WWF, WWE ones for many years on and off, WCW ones even. I even want an ECW one, which I'll talk about in a later podcast. So there's parties, gatherings, either way. This is going to be my first for TNA. I usually watch TNA pay-per-views alone because not many of my friends were into it. I wasn't really talking too much to my buddy Mark, who I mentioned on the tape trading episode. At the time, even though I knew he was a big TNA fan, but he wasn't living in the city at that point. So I invited a bunch of people over, Heather, a couple of her friends. I think my buddy Scott came over for it. I did not invite Dave and Ron. Like I said, wasn't friends with these guys for too long. I think it was after the WrestleMania 23 I stopped talking to them just before the Benoit tragedy. So I have all my friends over for Genesis. They'd never seen a TNA pay-per-view before. Some of them have been watching Impact leading up to this because of Angle. They saw the match with Angle and Abyss where Angle again put over strong. And again, it wasn't the worst idea. People thought Angle's first match should have been saved for the pay-per-view, and I kind of see the point. At the same time, though, putting him over someone as monstrous as Abyss builds him up for Joe in a lot of ways and gave Joe an excuse to attack him again. And like I said, Joe was undefeated here. He had dominated the X Division. He had one of the greatest matches I've ever seen, as I mentioned earlier, with AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels. He was pretty much in the main event picture now, that whole angle where he stole the title. So Samoa Joe at this point in late 2006 was one of the elite wrestlers in the world. And he always has been, even right up till recently, that way. But I mean, I'm talking about he was truly becoming a star. And I'm thinking Angle and him could lead TNA for years to come together. And the fact that this match was presented as a big deal. Angle's reputation, even though they wouldn't directly refer, they didn't need to directly refer to WWE. We all know who he is. But they still would emphasize what he could do and his skill set, obviously. With Joe, again, that story speaks for itself, but again, they hyped Joe's undefeated streak, his dominance of the X Division, everything. So I am psyched for this. Like I said, it felt like a big deal. UFC, at this point, now UFC is still big, but we're talking on astronomical levels around 2006 here and into 07 and whatnot. UFC was the shit. This felt like a UFC fight because these guys were portrayed as legit tough guys. So there you go. Now we're anticipating, and Heather has heard me talk about how great and perfect TNA pay-per-views are. How amazing they have been for the last couple of years. In 05 and in 06, right to this show, I loved almost every single pay-per-view. I can't remember one I didn't like. If I didn't like it, I don't remember not liking it. So as Genesis kicked off, again, really cool video package leading to the road to this show. I just loved it. It really built the anticipation. So people were intrigued because, again, for I think most people there, except for me, I think I was literally the only one who'd never seen, or the only one who had seen, a TNA pay-per-view. So the opening match was the Voodoo Kin Mafia versus, okay, this was a weird angle. Serotonin. This was never explained or never made a lick of sense. And I can't blame Russo for this one because I'm pretty sure this, I don't know. I can't remember if it started before or after he came in, but either way, I'm not going to blame him for this regardless. So it was Serotonin, the Kazarian, I think Matt Bentley. Yeah, Matt Bentley, he was in this match. Johnny Devine. They were all facing the Voodoo Kin Mafia, the former New Age Outlaws, whose name was just an entire rib on Vince McMahon. Haha, VKM, pal. Ha, I get it. Yeah, Russo's influence was really kicking into high gear here. And again, whatever. I'm not going to blame him for everything here. So, of course, Serotonin loses, and the ongoing story, Raven punishing them. Raven was just this weird white cloak, which is odd for him. Just never really paid off in any significant way. I mean, they had that thing with Team 3D, I guess. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of it, but again, nothing really just came of this. And it was very an anticlimactic finish to, well, to be fair, an anticlimactic angle as a whole. So, through the match, I remember Heather making New Age Outlaws jokes, which I thought was funny. But at the same time, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh no, this is her first TNA pay per view, and this is the first match she sees. Ugh. Not many people were impressed by that. Then we had the Naturals versus Sanjay Dutt and Jay Lethal. Now, on paper, I'm thinking this looks great. I mean, lots of talent here. I even said to Heather, I'll watch these guys. Watch all four of them. This is part of what makes the TNA Tag Team division so good. No, she wasn't impressed. None of them were. And I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen the match. I remember watching it myself thinking, yeah, well, it was what it was. Right? And then I'm thinking X Division here. Daniels and Sabin. Like, okay, I said this you're gonna love. And they did. They actually really liked this a lot. They said, oh wow, the X Division is fun, like you said. So like, okay, all right, because I want my friends to like this. I want to have more TNA pay-per-view parties. You know, we can watch the WWE stuff at QB's in Burlington, the QB Sports Bar, which we had been for. I know I had been for a little while now. At that point, a couple of years. So have they. My buddy Paul was actually supposed to come for this too, but I just couldn't make it at the last minute. So yeah, again, so thinking, yes, okay, the X Division won them over. Then there was Lance Hoyt and Not Yet R-Truth versus Austin Starr and Alex Shelley. And they were doing this thing with Kevin Nash at that time. Look, I don't hate Kevin Nash. I actually really like the guy. He was really nice to me when I met him. I thought the whole thing that Nash and these guys had potential. That's the thing. I thought this whole story had potential. Because whether you like Nash or not, you pay attention to what he does. It seems that people who hate him seem to know an awful lot about him. But I don't hate Nash. Not by a long shot. Like I said, I had the privilege of meeting him. He was great. I got to help him out at his merch table. He was a lot of fun. And whether you like it or not, folks, he put asses in seats. And you want to call him big lazy? Well, let's face it, he's made more money being so-called lazy than we have working hard. And no, I don't think Nash was lazy. I think Nash did what he was asked to do. I don't want to see Kevin Nash doing 30, 40 moves a match. But I digress. Sorry. So this match was, well, it was what it was. Yeah, I liked all four guys here. Yes, even R-Truth. Ron Killings, as he is known at the time. But once again, after that great X Division match, everybody's losing interest. They're starting to play cards. at the card table we had in the basement at the time. They're starting to text on their phones. I'm like, oh God. And then they said, oh no, we just want someone to say, well, we're waiting for Angle and Joe. I'm like, well, to be fair, that might have been why some of them were there anyway. So then I was like, okay, things are gonna pick up again. AJ Styles and Christian Cage. Now, they liked Christian. They liked Christian from WWE. So they were paying attention again. Suddenly, like, oh, Christian, hey. And I said, and then AJ Styles like, watch this guy. This guy is amazing. I said, you've never seen anyone like him. And again, much like the X Division match, they were blown away by it. Like, wow, yeah, that AJ guy's good. And they were enjoying Christian, seeing Christian again. Christian had been having a really good run at this point. So, logically, I'm thinking, okay, so we've had more good than bad, really. Some things have been disappointing, but at the same time, oh well. As Billy Bob Thornton said in Bad Santa, they can't all be winners, kid. Then next up, after that amazing match, which I still think is an underrated gem personally, it was the tag title match. Homicide and Hernandez, along with Conan. Again, they all knew Conan from WCW versus America's Most Wanted. I'm like, oh, here we go. It's just going to get even better from here. And from what I recall, they were kind of into this match, but I'm thinking, seeing them do better. And I just thought it was too short. I actually thought this match was too short. I'm thinking, oh, well, they probably got to make room for other matches. I'm like, so they were kind of into this, but not really. So I'm thinking, I don't know, my odds are 50-50 of ever holding another TNA Pay Per View party again. Because I liked enjoying wrestling with my friends. I did. And like I said, I didn't have a lot of friends who were enjoying wrestling at this point, and most of them lived in Burlington. So logically, I wanted to keep this, bond going with another wrestling company. I used to love it when my cousins and everybody would come over for WWF and WCW stuff. So Jim Cornette actually comes out. I remember this part because they all knew who Cornette was. And it was this is when he stripped them of the titles. And Heather was a big Cornette fan. She's like, oh, that's Jim Cornette. I love Jim Cornette. And everybody starts paying attention again. Yes, folks, whether you like it or not, people pay attention to Jim Cornette. They still do to this day, and he's living in a lot of your minds rent-free. So, this was the whole... LAX was getting some really good heat here at this point because they were trying to burn the flag. And they were very committed to it. Conan, I always like Conan as a heel. So, Cornette stripped some of the titles because of all this. I'm thinking, I don't know, lame. So how many times have we seen people do or attempt to do heinous acts and not have to lose a title because of it? So, whatever. So then it was Sting and Abyss. So again, Sting, right away. People stop what they're doing because they start getting distracted again. Sting and Abyss. And the title could change hands here on disqualification. And that's what happened. And they hated this. Absolutely hated this. I mean, it told a good enough story in my eyes. But I guess for new fans, it just wasn't it. And to be honest, it kind of was lame. The match itself was fine. But I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, they're shitting on this. And Heather actually turns to say to me, like, wow, this is the pay-per-views you're talking about? This is no better than WWE. Like, fuck. All I could think at that point, like, oh my God. Like, okay, Angle and Joe can redeem us. They will save us. Joe's undefeated. Angle is a huge star. Joe's becoming a big star in TNA. So everybody is this is what they came for in the end. Regardless of how they felt about the other matches, this is what they came for. I'm loving this match. Absolutely loving it. Such a great story. Again, that big fight feel. Just simply who's better. That's all it was. It just told an amazing back and forth story of Joe trying to get the clutch on, Angle trying to get that ankle. The angle slam. No, Joe gets out. Again, this is the back and forth, the drama they're building up here, and we're all into it. Ankle lock. Angle hits that grapevine because Joe's still struggling to get out of it. And I'm thinking Joe might be the first to really escape the grapevine. Nope. He taps, and people were cheering in my basement. They were cheering. Because again, most of them were Kurt Angle fans. They knew who Joe was. Some of them liked him, but in the end, they wanted to see their guy win. And I'm thinking, that was amazing. That pretty much redeemed the show, I thought. And it sets up future matches still. A lot of people shit on this. A lot of the smart marks did. Because they felt Joe should have gone overboard. They're just bringing a big star in. So they're supposed to job him his first really big match? But it wouldn't hurt. Again, this was these two guys I was referring to, Dave and Ron. They didn't get it. I'm not saying I necessarily did at that point, but I certainly got it more than they did. I said, well, they're bringing in this big star. They're just going to have him lose right away? This feud with him and Joe is not going to end. And when he was undefeated, it should have been to a guy that he could establish. I'm like, to me, in my eyes, an undefeated streak should end. Two different kinds of people. Guys, again, you're trying to elevate that have been built up. Guys you've been building up for a while, then you want to elevate them by bending a big streak. Or a big star coming in with lots of credibility that is convincing enough to beat that kind of streak. Little sidebar. Brock Lesnar's out of those things. Still hate that. Always will. That's our podcast for another day. But anyway, I was a little at first I was thinking, they could have had Joe go over maybe, but I'm like, who cares? It was a great match. And I can't wait to see more from these two. But people point to this moment as the time Joe went downhill in TNA. And in hindsight, some people have a point. Not saying it was because of this. This just happened to be the time. After this, Joe's run in TNA was hit or miss. He had some great stuff, had some not so great stuff. But in the end, and we can blame Russo for that, and I'm sure there are some ways it is his fault, but I'm sure there are other ways it's other people's fault too. But that's what TNA itself became, at least to me as a fan after that. Some stuff was great, some stuff not great at all. Yeah, that could have been because of Russo, but whatever. Angle went on to have a long run in TNA, 10 years, longer than he was with WWE. Everybody thought he was going to have a bit of a run in TNA, maybe one day come back to WWE, and he did, but not for a decade later, and he's pretty much retired. So, yeah. Wow. And again, Kurt had some great stuff there, had some not so great stuff there. Again, I'd probably go into those things on other podcasts. But as a debut, as bringing a big star in, TNA did all the right things here. I can't say they didn't. And I love that match. And it was great to have a TNA party with my friends. That being said, however, it was the first and only TNA party that I threw. I'd been to a couple others, but the interest of the company, and I guess maybe I overhyped it for them. I don't know. Maybe I gave it just too much of that. Overhype. Actually, no, I forgot that Joe did win a match at Turning Point, which again was great. I thought it was even better. Actually, the match at Turning Point was even better. I tried to invite my friends for that match. I did. I tried to invite my friends for that match, and they no, thank you. But you guys, you liked the last match with Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe. You're like, yeah, well, nah. I mean, yeah, it was great, but the rest of the show, I don't know. I see you guys like the X Division, like, oh yeah, that was good too, but I guess this wasn't enough to draw them in permanently. They would check in on it here and there. They would tell me, but they never became permanent TNA fans after that. So yeah, it was sad. I was hoping to grow their fandom, but alas, it did not happen. Either way, it was a nice time with some friends, and it was great to see Kurt in TNA feuding with someone like Joe. And they had that Iron Man match. I almost forgot about that too. I think that was that Final Resolution. So that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thank you all for tuning in. This trip down memory lane for episode 20. I want to do something special for episode 20, so I figured I'd do this episode. Kurt Angle and TNA. Thank you all once again. So this is going to do it for this week's episode of Diary of a Wrestling. Next week, WCW, at WCW again, Halloween Havoc 1997. Age in the Cage, brother. Nah, I shouldn't emphasize on that. The show, spoiler, was really good. And I'll talk a lot about that. So you can follow me on social media, BillChase33 on both Twitter and Instagram. Add me on Facebook at Bill Chase. So until then, this is Bill Chase, putting a wise Hamiltonian when I'm telling you all, don't you dare miss it. Thank you for listening to Diary of a Wrestling Fan with Bill Chase. If you'd like to make a contribution to the show, just purchase Bill an Android box that fucking works properly.